Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Gaffer and Gear. Today we're going to be looking at some DoP Choice products. Now this episode was organised by the guys at Aputure. Last week I had a look at the Aputure Nova P300c here, and Aputure wanted to make the point that even though they're probably a lesser known brand by film and television professional lighting people, that they do have the support of professional accessories. But before we get into that, we'll start off the review with some practical advice. For anybody looking to buy an Octodome, I'm going to show you a way of checking if that Octodome has any colour hue without the use of a colour spectrometer. And then we'll start looking at gear reviews. So today we're going to be looking at a snap grid, a snap bag for this unit, a snap grid for that snap bag. We're going to also have a look at a 3-foot Octodome, a 5-foot Octodome, and what will probably interest a lot of gaffers, particularly bigger scale gaffers, is this 5-foot lantern. Okay, so before we get into talking about the DoP Choice, I'm just going to give you a quick way of testing a dome. If you're looking at buying one and you're in a showroom, for example, a quick way of testing a dome with your eyes to see if there's any color hue in it. So what I mean by color hue is, does the silver actually add any green to the light? Now, this is something that happens with cheaper modifiers. And when I say cheaper modifiers, I'm even talking quality stuff like the Aputure here, like the Light Dome 2, which is a quality modifier. The silver in this does add a bit of green to the light. Now, in the top-end lights, it shouldn't happen. Sorry, the top-end modifiers, that shouldn't happen. How can you tell if there's any hue difference between the two if you don't have a color spectrometer? Well, here's a very simple way of doing it. What you do is you point a white light, something you know is white, into it. Okay, now if you're in a showroom, you should be able to find some sort of white light, even if it's just a window or something. And then what you do is you get on an angle where you can see a reflection of a reflection of a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. Every time you see a reflection of a reflection, you get more green. So if I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 reflections of the light, I see 7 times the amount of green that's actually there. So I can start seeing with my eyes what a color spectrometer can see. Now, when you go to a top-end product and you have a look inside it, you shouldn't see any green on any angle that you look. If it's an expensive product, there should be none there at all, because this should be very pure. And here's the problem. The most expensive difference in manufacturing cost is getting that pure silver. All right, so just to show this, looking from the front where you guys are, they look pretty similar. Okay, there's no obvious hue shift. Okay, but let's get on an angle where we can see reflections. Okay, 2, 3, so it's a reflection of my key light over there. I'll get a photo of that. And on this one, go. All right, now I'll toggle between the two photos. This is the DoP Choice, and this is the Aputure. All of the bits of fabric that have a ripple and face the front have pure white. All of the bits that are rippled and have a reflection facing towards the back are green. Now, on a lot of lower cost modifiers, this would be twice as green, and on the really cheap modifiers, this would even have a metallic blue tinge to it. All right, so realistically speaking, how green is it? Well, if I went to correct it with a magenta gel, I would end up too pink. Okay, so it's not a massive issue. By itself, it isn't worth spending 5 or 6 times the amount of money on a professional product like this. But when you factor in build quality differences, it is the deciding factor in a professional like me spending a lot of money on top-end product versus this. Okay, so before we get into having a look at the DoP Choice product, I'd just like to point out that DoP Choice did send me about 60% of the stuff we're going to look at today for this review. The other 40% of the stuff I already owned. So I think that sort of answers the question as to whether them sending me stuff is biased in my opinion. I already own their product and already use their products. So it's in good standing with me anyway. So anyway, let's have a look. We're going to talk about, first off, a snap grid. So I'll just explain what a snap grid is. So some of you might not know. So let's say we want to cut this light. So a snap grid is a modifier that controls your beam. Okay. So let's say we want to cut the light off this. So we don't want it going everywhere. So one way you could do it is with barn doors. Okay. But you'd need very big barn doors to cut this because it's a big source. So instead of having one set of big barn doors, which take up a lot of space on your set, can take up a lot of real estate. What would work just as well is a whole stack of small barn doors, which is what a snap grid is. Okay, so how this works is you can see me through, but when you get to a certain angle, you can't see me through it. Okay, so if you've ever got a snap grid and you can't figure out what beam angle it is, basically just have a look through it, tilt it, can't see that side, can't see that side. That'll tell you the degrees of the beam angle. Okay, so the edges are elastic. Okay, so now when these things are new, they are a little bit painful to put on because the elastic is tight on purpose so that it actually wears in, it doesn't wear out straight away. Okay, so I had forgotten about that until I got my hands on these new ones. But when they get to about a year old, they are easy to put on. Actually, that wasn't so bad. There you go. Sometimes you find when they're brand new, you're fighting them. Okay, you'll put this corner on, that corner will pop off. Okay, so, but that's because they're new. And this unit has straps on the back. So just put those through, Velcro straps, to stop it coming off. All right, so let's have a look at what it does. So let's kill the house lights. Okay, so as you can see there, it's reduced it to a 40-degree beam. Okay, give me some control. Now I'll just quickly rip it off so you can see the difference. Now, these are pretty much the Rolls-Royce product, and sometimes you can't always afford a Rolls-Royce, and that's me. So I do have some cheaper units as well, but that gives you one huge advantage. I can point out the difference between these and the cheaper units. So the first difference I'd like to point out is the walls here. So the walls here have, they're reinforced and they're sprung outwards, and that's why it's called a snap grid. So if you unpack it, that was a bit lame, let's try that again. It snaps, okay, so that's how they got the name, snap grid. So what that does, that tension, is it pushes all the cells out, all the cell walls out, so nothing sags. So a good acid test between this and cheaper product is to get your Leatherman tool, which is nice and heavy, find the center, particularly in the bigger units, find the center and sit it in there. Okay, and you'll notice that it doesn't make everything sag. So that's really the acid test on a unit like this. The next big point of difference is all of the cell walls are sewn. So that's something to look out for. With other units, you've got your cell wall, it's got a cut in it, and they just feed the other piece through. Now that works okay as long as everybody before you has packed it up correctly. If they haven't packed it up correctly, then you find yourself having to adjust the cell walls and put everything back into place, and that can be quite painful. Now the next real big point of difference between this and real cheap product is the even distribution of the cells. So on cheaper units, you can have the same size cells at one end, and then when they get down to the far end, they just go with half a cell or whatever was left. And the problem with that is it affects the distribution of the light. So for example, this unit here has a beautifully even beam, okay? Whereas if the cell walls were slightly smaller on one side, it would be a circle here and it would be an egg shape on that side. So that's something to look out for. All right, so let's talk about packing this up. It's really quite straightforward, but again, one of the advantages watching my channel is I do have a little rentals business, so I know the common mistakes that people make. So to get this unit off, you just take the Velcro off. Now, different snap grids will have a different configuration depending on the light they're going on. Some might have a pulley here, like an elastic pull to wrap it around the light. Some will have straps. Some have nothing, just the elastic because of the shape of the light, so they're a little bit different. Okay, getting it off the light, pretty straightforward. Now, I just want to point something out for anyone that's looking to buy these, if you have a rental company or if you're looking to buy alternatives. What I found, the biggest problem I found is particularly young operators like film students, they will try and twist this up like it's a flexi-fill to get it in the bag. Now, what I found from experience, the DoP Choice product survives that, but some of the other brands, the cheaper brands, don't because they crack down the spines. So, look, in all fairness and being impartial in my videos, the cheaper stuff, if you're using it all the time and you're the only person using it, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're not in control of who's using your kit, like you don't have control over your best boys or if you're doing rentals, this will survive rentals really well. The cheaper product does not. So I'm finding that 3 years on that the DoP Choice is like the day I bought it. Okay, now getting this into the bag. So the different size snap grids will fold up different lengths. So some of them will fold in half, some will fold in thirds, some you fold in quarters. So basically have a look at your bag and go, well, okay, all right, that's about, I reckon, allowing enough space for it for the bag to close, that's about a third. So we just fold it into thirds. All right, so click, click. Okay, thirds there. Okay, and into the bag. So really is that straightforward to pack up. All right, so before we get into talking about softbox modifiers, I'm going to talk about one problem you're going to have with a heavy light like this Nova and other heavy lights as well, and I'll just explain the issue first. So the problem with a small compact light like this is the cooling systems. The bigger the light, the easier it is to cool, but the smaller it is, the more compact the heat is, or the smaller the radius of area that you've got to dissipate heat off. So you need very big heat sinks to dissipate the heat. You need a lot of cooling systems. And the other thing too is in a light like this, which is basically 5 lights in one, warm white, cool white, red, green, blue, you've got a lot of circuitry. So something like this is quite heavy. Here's the issue. In order for a light that's this heavy not to be a tip hazard when it's on a normal light stand, you need to have the stirrup set up so that the weight is over the center of gravity. So you can't have an offset stirrup. So the problem with lights like this that don't have an offset stirrup is if you put a light modifier on it like a softbox, when you go to tilt, the softbox is going to jam on the stirrup. So I'd recommend before you buy any softboxes for the Nova or any other light that has this issue, I would buy one of these adapters. This is a 45-degree junior adapter. You just basically put this in the top of your light stand and it enables you to offset your stirrup. Now you can get two choices with these. You can get 45 degrees or 90 degrees. I would hold out until you can get a 45 degree, and here's why. If you have the light at 90 degrees, the center of gravity is a long way offset from the columns on the stand. But if you have it at 45 degrees, it's very much closer and less of a tip hazard. Now, I don't have one of these adapters to show you the tip hazard because my other lights don't need them. So I'm going to use a sky panel to show you how easy you can tip one of these over. Now, for this demonstration, I'm doing the ultimate sin. I have a heavy light and no shot bag on my stand. Now, the only reason this is not tipping over is because I have a stand leg positioned directly under the weight. Okay, so the payload is being supported by a light stand leg directly underneath. Now, if I turn this onto a 45-degree angle so it doesn't have a leg underneath it, watch this. Okay, so make sure if you're using a softbox modifier on a light like the Nova that you have a leg directly underneath the Nova and you have shot bags on your stand. All right, so let's get around to putting the snap bag on. So a couple of things I'll point out. I've taken the controller off the back of the Nova so you can see what I'm doing up here. And the next thing I want to point out is for people who have bought their product in the past, they have fixed the bags. So the bags were one of the biggest irritations for me. So the bags are now fixed. They won't fall apart after 6 months. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, here's a couple of tips to help you. The first thing that stuffs people up, and again, I run a little rentals operation, is this piece of elastic here, okay? That goes to the front of the light, okay? That's to help you tension it. So a lot of people mess up trying to get this around the back, and then I invariably have to go around to where they're shooting to try and take it off because I'm worried about them destroying it. The next thing that will help you get these on is to figure out which is the top and which is the bottom. There actually is a top and a bottom. So if your light, of course, if your light has a carry handle, there's a top and a bottom. So I'll just explain the top and the bottom. So on the top, there's a little strap. Okay, so watch this. Okay, that strap holds the softbox in place to help me put it on. Okay, so it's like having an additional set of hands around the front when you don't have them. So that's a little tip that'll help speed you up. Now the edges are elastic, so you just get the edges over the corners of your light. And there's little pulleys here to help you if you want. Okay, and we're on. All right, now remember that elastic at the front I was talking about? Let's have a look at that. All right, now that supplies the tension here. So I just make sure that I'm over the front like that, okay? And that supplies the tension along these lines, okay? So you get a nice connection. Now we're going to do the straps on the back. Now, not all lights have straps. Some of them have enough elastic that it pulls onto the lights, but with the shape of this, you need the straps. Okay, and now we're ready to put our diffuser in the front. Okay, so now let's put our diffuser in, and it comes with a half grid cloth. Now, if you're buying soft boxes, regardless of what brand you buy, I'd recommend getting ones with a removable diffusion, not diffusion that's sewn in. What I found in the past with diffusion that's sewn in, if you get any damage to your diffuser, that's the softbox pretty much written off. But if you've got removable diffusion, well, you just buy a new piece of diffuser. Now you can buy other grades of diffuser. So this comes with a half grid, but I found I never bothered because going through this and then going through this, it's soft enough. Now the big mistake a lot of people make is they put this directly onto the edge like that. Okay, don't do that. What you want to do is find your edges, pin it, and then get that, find where they line up into the material here. And that'll give you enough space here for a snap grid that you can put on the front if you have a snap grid. So you line up your edges, get it nice and tense. And there you go, softbox built. Now just very quickly, for those of you who don't know, the only reason that this is a softer light source now is because it's a bigger light source, that's all, okay? So the bigger your light source relative to your subject, the more it wraps, okay? So it wraps around, you know, shadows wrap around noses, into wrinkles, things like that. Okay, let's, as soon as I remember where I put the snap grid, we'll put that on. Okay, so now let's pop on a snap grid. Now just something I want to point out here, this is not a snap grid supplied by DoP Choice for this review. This is one of my snap grids and it is 3 years old, so you get an idea of how they hold up. Okay, there you go. Now while we're here, I'm just going to give you a quick tip. So if you're packing up and you're trying to figure out, you know, which snap grid belongs to what kit, if it's got Velcro on it, it attaches to a softbox. If it's got elastic on it, it was designed to attach to a light. So that can help you figure out what belongs to what. Now have a look here at how this retains its shape. So again, 3 years old, it's still retained its shape. Watch how easy this is to put on the light. Okay, because it's already in shape when I go to put it on. There you go. How quick's that? I already own 6 of these DoP Choice snap bags, and where I use them a lot is in outdoor broadcasts. They're just big enough to be soft, but just small enough that they're not going to give me a problem if the wind picks up. And I can easily cover them over if it starts to rain. The other place where they're handy is in studio. They're big enough to be soft, but just small enough that I can peek them over the back of set as a backlight. And where the snap grid really heroes is it stops any spill light coming down the wall. All right, so the next modifile we'll have a look at will be of interest to people doing corporate interviews, things like that, and that is the 3-foot Octodome. So not a bad little unit. I do have to say, this is probably the most difficult of their units to set up. So the first time you set it up, you definitely don't want to be doing it on set. You'd want to do a practice at home or before you get there because you're going to look like a bit of an idiot. The second and third time, easier and easier, and look, it takes a bit of setting up because there's a lot of tension in it, but it's not as difficult as some domes, so let's take a look. All right, to mount a dome light onto an LED, you're going to need a set of these rabbit ears. Now, if you're old enough to remember why these are called rabbit ears, so yeah, rabbit ear TV antennas, don't admit to it. Okay, so just one thing I want to point out for gaffers, if you've got your Sky Panel S60s, your Sky Panel S30s, and you're looking to buy these and just use the same set of rabbit ears, you can't just undo the screws and move these in, it won't fit, okay? It's a different thickness slider, and the other difference too is this unit has a lock off up here, but you don't need to buy a whole new set of rabbit ears. You can just buy this re-accessory multi-1 connector kit instead of buying a whole new set of rabbit ears and repurpose your system. All right, so with the 3-foot Octo, you get a bag, you get a inner baffle, which I don't think you need for this light, to be quite honest with you, but keep a hold of it in case you use this on a smaller light where you need the baffle to spread. And you also get a magic cloth diffuser. Okay, so let's start assembling it. Now, why I say this is a little bit more difficult than the other lights to set up, it's not difficult, it just takes a bit more time, is you need to tension and untension this every time you go to use it. So the first thing you want to untension is the rods. So I'll just get all this spread out. So on the rods here, you've got this Velcro piece. So basically you pull that out, move it up like that, and then reconnect it. Okay, so it's sticking out from the rest of the diffuser. Sorry, the rest of the, what's this thing called? Modifier, that's the word I'm looking for. All right, so you might be wondering, why don't I just do this and leave it in the bag like this? Well, Velcro is one of those things that you can have a love-hate relationship with. So if you do this, if you do leave it pre-untensioned, it's going to be a nightmare when you go to pull it out. Everything's stuck together. All right, the next thing I'd suggest is go to the other end and undo as much Velcro as you can. See what I mean? Velcro is a love-hate thing. It's all sticking together. All right, now start at the top of the unit. So what you do is you put your two bigger rabbit ears up. Hold on, before we do that, I would suggest feeding it through. Okay, there we go. Oops. Right, now put your two rabbit ears up, your top ones. Okay, in the top of the rabbit ear there's a hole. So you just put the rod into the hole. Same thing on the other side. So good idea, always start at the top. Now it's being held in place for you. Okay, and then just go around and put the rods into the rest of the holes. Extend your bottom rabbit ears out. Okay, now at this point we want a retension. Okay, so what we're going to do is move all of these back in. Now you're not going to be able to do it in one go, you're going to have to do probably 2 circuits. Now you don't have to do the next step, but if you're OCD like me, spin it around and seal up the back. Now when you seal up the back, just make sure you're not covering over too much air venting. Alright, so before I put the diffuser on, I just want to talk about the rods, because the concern I had when I bought my 5-foot Octodomes 3 years ago was these rods wouldn't hold up. They do look a little bit pathetic. You're spending all this money and you think you're getting a coat hanger, but what I found is they do hold up. So 3 years on, I'm still using the original rods and they're in place and working well. I think what it is the other soft boxes like Shimura have those really fat rods, but those rods are hollow so they can flex, whereas these ones are solid. Okay, there we go. We'll fire up the Nova. And we're done. Now at this point, I owe Stefan from DoP Choice an apology. I told him that I did have a snap grid for this Octodome, but I don't. I was thinking about the 5-footers. So I can't show you a snap grid for this, but I can show you the snap grid on my 5-foot Octodomes. And let's give it the Leatherman test. No sagging at all. Now, the one thing I want to point out here with the Nova is it does have enough beam angle spread to light a large modifier like this. But I have found a problem. The stirrup flexes and doesn't seem to be comfortable with the weight if you've got the snap grid on the front. Without a snap grid, it seems to be okay. But if you're a professional gaffer, you're probably going to want a snap grid on the front of your 5-foot Octodome. The last thing I want to talk about is the size of your Octodome. So this is the 5-foot. You can also get a 7-foot. Now, a lot of young gaffers ask me, should I get the 7-foot? I'm going to spend all this money, should I just spend a little bit more and get a bigger unit? So the reason I've got this set up in my living room instead of in my garage is to give you some gauge of the size. Now imagine trying to maneuver a 7-foot Octodome around a domestic premises like this. It might be great in studio, but if you're doing location work, it could be a bit of a nightmare. Now the last thing I want to point out with this Octodome is this was not supplied by DoP Choice for the review. This is one of 2 that I own that are 3 years old. It still has its original rods and it still retains its form factor. On this shoot, we were using RGB fixtures to change the colour of the background wall. Setups like this are where my Octodomes come in particularly handy, especially with the snap grids. Any stray light from my keys here would desaturate the colour on the backgrounds. The Octodomes have very limited spill light coming out of the back of them and the beam is very well contained. Now in that previous section I didn't show you how to set up a 5-foot Octodome because I've already done a video on it and it is way simpler to set up than the 3-foot Octodome. Alright, so let's have a look at the lantern. So I thought I'd start off with it already on the light so you can see inside it because this thing really is simple to build and very, very cleverly thought out. Okay, so you've got rods inside which of course give you the shape. Those rods then attach to these other rods so they just clip in, okay? And then these rods clip into your rabbit ears. So pretty straightforward. Now each one of these rods attaches into elastic, which you can see here, which goes to the center point, which you can then tension to get the unit into shape. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to tilt it back over, I'm going to close the back up, and then I'm going to show you how simple it is to tension this thing. Now, one thing that makes this really easy to close up is half of your flaps are zips. Now, where the zips are good, it enables you quick access if you can see that you've set something up wrong. Now, if I want to tension it, I just pull the elastic here in the front. Now, if you've got this on a menace arm, you don't want this floating around, I just feed that back in through the belly button. Now, as an optional extra for this, you can also get this skirt kit, which is zippable on 3 sides and super easy to adjust. Okay, that's this episode of Gaffering Gear done. I'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.